Okay, I've been meaning to write an article about this and I just haven't had time. And it's a little easier to just dump my thoughts in this video. So basically, one of the big issues that I'm seeing across the board, whether it's at work, clients, et cetera, is that you're starting to see a lot of people upskill and realize that code agents definitely are here to stay and that it's going to be a driving force going forward. I think, especially myself, I spent a lot of time this last year upskilling people and helping people use these tools in an effective way. And I think pretty much everyone who was against stuff like Cursor or Cloud Code has now pretty much, I don't want to say given up, but it's pretty clear that these tools are here to stay. And if you don't know how to use them, you're going to get left behind. Obviously, a lot of this is oversold by the hype, but I think it's clear that the code generation tools, agents, whatever you want to call it, are here to stay. But that's going to bring a set of problems. And rather than just saying, "Oh, it's all slop," blah blah blah. One of the big things that I've been experimenting with a lot, even before all this, is the ability to guardrail these agents is going to become the biggest differentiator between someone who can ship to production good, clean, modular code versus just like slop. Because what slop really is just tech debt turned up 10x because of how much more code you can produce. And I've been thinking about this problem for a while because we have this issue at work. But also whenever I take on a client, one of the big issues that I'm seeing is you're seeing just so much more code generation. And usually that last mile was always the hardest issue to solve traditionally. For example, a lot of my contracts came from clients who got a project that they had hired someone and they got something that was essentially broken and didn't work. And in the past, it was 50-50 if we were going to have to rebuild it completely. Sometimes it's just easier to completely restart. But for half of them, we just had to go in and clean up some of the backend stuff, some of the logic, et cetera, et cetera. But now what I'm starting to see is I'm starting to see so many projects that are, I can tell what models they're using. Like I can see that they're using Gemini. I can see that they're using Claude. And there's so much more spaghetti code now because of all the ability to generate this code. And I would say now 90% of the projects that I took on this year were pretty much having to be rebuilt from scratch because it was just such a huge mess. And it's becoming a big issue, right? Because people don't want to, you don't want to tell someone that, hey, the last year that you spent on this project is useless. We got to start over again. And the problem is like these code tools, they're going to just keep generating more and more code and it's going to become a commodity. So the question is like, how do we solve that? How do we fix that? I think it's pretty clear. The guardrails need to be up. Obviously, you need to have the skills and the wherewithal of this. You need to have like that foundational knowledge. But at the end of the day, the issue is that the code generation is just going and context engineering definitely helps. I think that's clear. But because of the nature of these tools, how they're trained to constantly produce more. For example, with Cloud Code, one of the big things that it does, it constantly wants to generate its own random scripts to test itself, which is good in theory. But the problem is it'll forget to delete one or it'll pass one just by making a comment and it'll just do what it has to do to get the test passed because that's ironically what humans do. But it just wants to always generate more and more. And yes, they have fixed that, but that's still a major issue with any tool, right? But I think the way to handle it, one of the ways to handle it, and one of the ways that I'm experimenting with, and I was talking to Alex, shout out to Stallion, but one of the ways that I was thinking about this, obviously AST grep is a good tool. You saw this with Aider, the CLI tool back in the day, that was getting context with AST. And he was doing some interesting stuff with the heuristics of the code with AST grep. And that's how he was getting context with the code agent, quote unquote. It wasn't really even an agent. It was more of a workflow that he developed. And I think something like that going forward is going to be the way to be able to define and find these anti-patterns, dry violations, et cetera, et cetera. And there's tools like CodeRabbit and whatnot. But I also think that it's going to be flow dependent, right? For example, at work, we have certain workflows where we can't bring in any third-party tools, et cetera, et cetera. But I think guardrailing is going to be the biggest thing going forward to learn. But also, I think there's going to be an entire economy developed around these type of tooling, workflows, whatever you want to call it. And it's something to keep in mind.